Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. Slightly different format today. This is episode 139A. There's also an episode out there, 139B. You see, I have two questions from two different people, and they're both very worthy of an answer. Both are pretty short, but they have nothing to do with one another, so I'm going to make them into two separate pieces. The reason for that is that I'm gathering all of my podcasts on Zettelkasten over in lilypub.org, where they're organized as a tutorial. So I put them in the proper section depending on what they deal with. So I have to break this one in two because the two pieces are going to go in two different places over there. So the first question comes from Marcos, and Marcos wants to know, what makes an idea worth it to be included in your Zettelkasten? He says he's collecting a lot of bib notes, but he hasn't made any main cards yet, and he is struggling with, well, how do I know which ideas are worthy of inclusion? So that's the first one I'm going to deal with. The best answer to this question came to me from Nicholas Gatien. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He has a YouTube channel. You can look him up. He's quite an amazing young fellow. And this is his answer to what bib notes ought to be included as main notes in your Zettelkasten. Two scales, novelty and applicability. Novelty is whether or not this is a new idea in your Zettelkasten or a new idea to you. And applicability has to do with why are you reading the book? Why are you consulting that source? As you know, or you may have been exposed to, when you create your bib card for any news source, you should always include on the face of the card, why are you consulting that book? Why are you reading that book? Why are you watching that video? Why have you decided to read that paper? Because your purpose, you should always be bringing your purpose to your work. So your purpose will determine the applicability. So you have a note, and so if that note is both applicable to your purpose and new to you or new to your Zettelkasten, then by all means turn it into a main card. And that main card, as you know, I cannot stress this enough, is information from your source plus your reaction and your thoughts to that information that you've added. Well, what about the other cases? Well, let's take the trivial case. If it isn't new to you or your Zettelkasten, and it isn't applicable to what you're doing, forget it. Ignore it. If it's applicable to what you're doing, but you've already got notes about it in your Zettelkasten, just make a note of it. Oh, yeah, I see it's mentioned again. Interesting. Just observe. And here's the interesting one, which is rather interesting. If it's not in your Zettelkasten before, it's interesting, but it's not applicable to what you're doing right now, but it's tantalizing, then make an XREF out of it. Well, what is an XREF? Scott Shepard covers these quite beautifully. I myself don't tend to use them. When I make them, it's usually to show someone what an XREF looks like. Basically, with an XREF, you make an index entry only, and instead of putting the address of your main card, you put the bib address. You put the reference address in there with the presumption that if you decide to look into that later, you'll go pull the bib card and make a main card at that time. But the key thing that I wanted to bring here to answer your question, Marcos, if it's new to your Zettelkasten or new to you, and if it's applicable to the reason that you're reading that source, by all means, make a main card. Now, if you're stuck in the position where you haven't made any main cards yet because of nervousness, then I'm going to go a little bit further. And I'm going to say, for at least the space of one bib card, just to get you going, just to get it started, go ahead and make a main card for every bib note that you took on that bib card. Not because you need to, but because you need to be in the practice of making main cards. And that'll get you moving and get you used to the concept of making main cards. That's going to get boring really quickly. And when it starts to get boring and tedious, then you can say, okay, is it new? Is it applicable? Yes, make a main card. I hope that answers your question, Marcos. If not, well, we've got comments below and you can ask a refinement of your question there. Thank you for your question. Bye-bye. Oh, and don't forget to tune in for the part B